It's morning for us, but it's in the evening over where our next guest is. And this has been a plight for me for a few years because I missed out on his keynote speech at the International Wolf Symposium in 2022. And so we are absolutely honored and it's a pleasure to welcome Professor Luigi Boitani from Italy to discuss many things, wolves in Italy and some of his other work. He's had such a storied career, and so we thank him for coming on our podcast. Professor, it's wonderful to meet you. How you doing?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm fine, very well. And it's early evening here in Rome, and it's fine weather into the spring.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we have a little bit of a heat wave here in California, so hopefully some of that spring weather will return. Um, just, I know you've had such a long and storied career, but tell everybody who's listening, who may not be familiar with your work, how did this journey begin for you? Did you grow? Obviously, I assume you grew up in Italy. What was this journey like for young Luigi getting into research in large carnivores?
Well, it's by chance, I should say. Yeah, I can tell you that I always loved animals when I was a kid, but this really doesn't count. Then I went to the university and I wanted to study. I mean, I got the first degree, master degree in zoology. I wanted to do a thesis on real animals, that is, mammals to me. I couldn't get it at that time in Rome, and so I did a thesis on dragonflies. But then I decided that that was not enough, so I went to study to Yale University, and I went there for a year and a half, and then I was called back to Italy they offered me a position I couldn't refuse, so I came back. And I had an idea of studying some kind of wild goat in a secluded small island off the coast of Italy, and that was my plan. But when I came back to Italy, my friends from WWF, um, the Italian appeal of the WWF, they asked me, "Could you please give us, just 2 3 months time a consultancy just to find out the situation of wolves in Europe?" And I say, "Well, that's okay. 3 months, I can do that before I go off to my islands there." And so the 3 months are actually have not stopped yet. It's now 50 years. It continues to go on.
And so what was the initial goal of the early research?
They just want to find out how many wolves were left, more or less. Of course, you can't count wolves like you count apples in a basket, but just to give an estimate of how many and where they were left. So that was the first information they want. And then I did it. And then at the end of that, the result was actually appalling because our estimate was at that time was a 70, 71, 72. We estimated no more than 100 wolves left in a few isolated pockets. And and so we immediately say, well, it would be very important to know more of the biology of these surviving animals. How do they survive? Also, because at that time, there was not a single wild prey in central Italy. There was no deer, no wild boar, nothing. So basically, wolves were surviving out of a few sheep, of course, but mostly out of garbage that was available. Because at that time, most of the small village in the mountains had a sort of an open dump outside the village. Now you don't find that anymore, of course, but at that time, yes, and there was plenty of food for the wolves. And so anyway, we decided it was important to study the wolves a little bit better, and we convinced WWF to support the project with some good funding. And at that moment, I decided that I was not good enough to do this project by myself. And so I invited the best expert on wolf behavior at that time in Germany was Eric Ziemann, and the best wolf biologist at that time and even today, Dave Meach from North America. And they both came to Italy and I started the project together. And that was the beginning of a long story that has not yet finished yet.
What was it like when you brought your three minds together to start this thing from the ground up?
Well, Dave Meach came over from Minnesota with the traps and with the radio collars that were just beginning to be used in wolf. I mean, in biology in general. And actually, the wolf that we radio collared in central Italy with this project was the second animal ever radio collared in Europe. Dave McDonald in Oxford just beat me by radio collaring a fox before me. But otherwise, those were the early days of radio telemetry, and there was a fantastic technical advance. You could finally you could really understand what the wolves were doing and how they were moving, what they were eating, and most important, their behavior in relation to human activities and in relation to villages and towns and traffic and whatever.
So you had radio collars, traps. What other tools, if there were any, or approaches or tactics did you have at your disposal at the time to count wolf populations?
We had an estimate of how many wolves there were, and so they decided to go trapping in the area where we suspected there were most of the wolves. That was the area of the Abruzzo National Park, which is a national park not far from Rome, actually. Today you can drive from Rome to the Abruzzo in an hour and a half, and there were bears and wolves left, and we set the traps there in the park. And in fact, we captured the first three wolves there, and then we moved to a nearby mountain range that was more convenient for us and more interesting because we were out of the protected area, and the wolf biology there was more representative of what the other wolves were actually living in central south of Italy.
Can you give any context to why there was so few wolves in Italy at the time? I'm sure there's some historical references to it. We spoke with a couple of other guests with, talking about, the persecution of wolves. But to your knowledge, what was the reasoning why so few wolves and predators just in general and very little prey species in Italy?
Was you should ask the other question is why there were still wolves at that time.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Because they wolves had been exterminated all over, not all over, but almost all over Europe. And those few left in central southern Italy actually was a surprise for us because, as I say, there was nothing to eat, and wolves were regularly killed, poisoned. Wolves were not protected until 69. I mean, in 69, we were still hunted. In 71, we got the first rule of protection of wolves, and it was a temporary. So the wolves became a fully protected species only in 76. So wolves were killed by shepherds and even hunters. Hunters were used to use poison baits to kill fox and all the other predators. So it actually was a surprise that few wolves were still alive at the time.
I mean, so was this population of remaining wolves, would you say they were discovered, meaning did a researcher simply stumble upon this population and say, wow, I had no idea they still existed? Or was it widely known that they had kind of a stronghold even through the extirpation, I guess?
No, there were regular news on the newspaper in Italy at that time, especially in winter time. The stories of the wolves come down to the mountain, from the mountains, they come to the village, and typical kind of information. It's a, it actually is not a fake news. It's a partial news because wolves actually were used to come to the village every night, day, night, winter and summer. The only difference is that in wintertime you get snow on the ground, you see the track, and you say, "Wow, the wolves are here." But in summer times you don't have this the tracks, and you think the wolves are not there, but the wolves actually are there, every day of the year. And the early radio tracking result was very interesting from this point of view because it showed us a wolf that was actually living close by to villages and people all the time.
Right. Well, so we reframed the question about wolves, like you said, to why are there still wolves, which is a more interesting question. But you did mention that when you started the research, there was not a large number of large prey available to wolves. So what happened to these ungulates, to these large ungulates, that they were no longer found on the landscape?
Ungulates had been exterminated completely by unregulated hunting.
Mm-hmm.
That was the very simple answer. So there was nothing really left. But more or less around the time we started to work on wolves, the Abruzzo National Park, for example, did the first reintroduction of red deer. And then the same was done in two other protected areas in central Italy. And at the very same time, the hunters organization started to import and release wild boar from Eastern European countries into Italy. That was actually very badly done because they used wild boar from a completely different genetic background, and the wild boar from the Balkans, from the Eastern country, were and still are huge animals compared to the wild boar that Italy used to have. But anyway, the wild boar, as you know, they are omnivores. They eat everything. They adapt to everything. So the population exploded. And so in few years, our wolves easily shifted from the garbage dump to deer and wild boar.
Was there any concern? Obviously, you raised the concern about the wild boar being reintroduced and not being the same size. Were those same concerns there with the reintroduction? Did you say roe deer or red deer? I couldn't.
Both, both, both.
Both. Okay. Was there a concern about the shift in the ecology with that reintroduction, seeing them not be there for a period of time?
No, because I mean, wolves, of course, started to kill wild prey, but don't forget that wolves usually go for the easiest prey. And so, in having to, possibility to choose between a, a big wild boar and a sheep, I mean, wolves would have no problem in deciding to go for the sheep. And so they actually continue to use the dumps, the open dumps, until they were closed down. So that took a few years because the new rules were implemented slowly, and so you could see that we have been monitoring the wolf um, diet in many parts of Italy for several years, and we could see the shift from from the garbage to the large ungulates, and less to the livestock, because also the livestock numbers decreased sharply in those years. The abandonment of mountain agriculture, the abandonment of sheep in the traditional sheep industry had diminished the availability of sheep and goats in the mountains anyway.
Were these sheep bands that wolves were predating on accompanied by humans or dogs or anything?
Always. That was the trick of the coexistence that allowed the wolf to persist in Italy, is indeed the traditional pastoral life. And the traditional way of keeping sheep in central Italy was to have small flocks, never more than 400-500. That was really a big one.
That's
And
huge. Okay.
there is even a word in the local dialect in Abruzzo, which is morra. One morra is one unit that is manageable in wolf country, and is 300 sheep one shepherd, and three dogs, three guarding dogs. Now you can double with one more and do two moras, but not three moras, because then nine dogs are not enough. I mean, it's really the upper
Wow.
ceiling. You cannot have a flock bigger than that.
Wow. And these
So
dogs were they Maremma sheepdogs?
exactly, they are called the Abruzzo Maremma, the Abruzzo slash Maremma, not the Maremma. The Maremma dogs are a sort of degeneration of the Abruzzo one, and it's a way for making the Abruzzo dogs compatible with with life in cities and in apartments. So they become fluffy and nice, white, and so on. But the real Abruzzo
Yeah.
guarding dog, it's a tough animal, stink and it's dirty and doesn't like you. And he pretended to be a sheep and wants to be with a sheep and doesn't listen to anyone. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they are the kind of dogs that is common from the Central Asian steppe into the Mediterranean. And every country has this more or less the same dog, but every country thinks that his dog is the best one. So, you know, the French one have a kind of guarding dog that's called Patou and looks exactly like a Maremma or Abruzzo dog, but it's Patou. The Spanish one, the Turkish Akbash, the same. There was an American professor, Ray Coppinger, a very nice professor, um, an expert on canine behavior. And he came over to Europe to collect some of these dogs and bring them back to America, where he made all sorts of tests to find out why they are so good against wolves and which breed is the best one and so on, and with the intention of using them to protect flocks from coyotes in North America. And so he actually got a large grant from the federal government at that time. So he came back and took back from the Mediterranean several animals into Massachusetts and produced a very nice papers and books. And he actually, if you want to know the full story, he decided that the Italian breed, the Abruzzo Maremma, was the best one over all the other guarding dogs. Why? Because he's more stupid. He's not afraid.
Yeah. He won't run.
He's not.
Yeah.
And
No fear.
the trick of these dogs is not is that they don't run away.
Yeah.
Why they are so good? Because they stand. And by standing, they disrupt the aggressive behavior of wolves.
Exactly.
You know, so they are not meant to fight. If they would fight the wolves, they would
Yeah.
die.
Of course.
Wow. It's just about courage under fire, basically.
Yeah.
Man. So Luigi, in those 4 year, roughly 4 years, it seems like, if I'm getting the timeline correct, in the early 70s, I'd say from 72 to 76, there was a lot of change between protection coming, getting rid of the trash heaps, the shifting of the mountain communities, and sort of, I guess, this getting rid or losing the sheep herds and things like that. Why did all this happen so quickly? It seems as though in other situations where there's a conservation effort or a research effort, it goes decades. Why was this so quick to happen in terms of research, preservation, and then all these shifting dynamics?
But those were the years of the in, between the 60s and the 70s was when Italy really exploded from an economic point of view. The post-war years really gave the best result in that decades, and so the economy was going so well that people abandoned the mountains and went to the cities and working and not anymore in agriculture or in farming. where the areas were not good enough. At the same time was the year when WWF really exploded in by the public opinion, and the word conservation came over. And so I like to think that our work helped a process that was going on anyway for historical reasons and local reasons. But certainly what we did, a big campaign, everybody was, all the newspaper, radios and television at that time were talking of this wolf project, because suddenly the wolf became an animal to be protected, not anymore this phantom that comes down from the mountains in wintertime once in a while and so on. So, in we really notice a change in the public opinion. All the newspapers start to talk favorably about the wolves, and we obtain easily the first law um, for compensation of the damage done by the by the wolves. So that was very, very important. And in 72, but 73 was the first law issued by the region Abruzzo, so that anyone could claim damage done by wolves and could claim a compensation for that. That was a major change.
Are there similar
Wow.
compensation programs for other predators?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, I would say most European countries have a compensation law for large carnivores, bear, wolves, and lynx.
So in this time also, because you've done work with bears as well, were there similar research projects happening? I know you were specific, it seems like, to wolves at that time, but did it expand off of that with the same parameters in place, trying to find densities where they were, how they were recovering with the reintroduction of ungulates? Was it similar in that way, or a different set altogether?
Not really. There was in Italy, for example, there were two population, let's call it this way, of bears. One was in the Abruzzo, in fact, but were few animals left, probably something between 50 and 60 and so on. And another very small group fading away was up in Trentino, which is a region close to the border with Austria. And there, the bears actually were disappearing. There were probably 5 or 6 left. And the big effort there went into reintroducing bears from Slovenia to boost the local population, which they did actually in the following years. So anyway, was a time of concern for the large carnivores. Started in Italy, and then quickly spread into Spain. I remember that. Spain or still had a good population of wolves, but was hunted, and so there was concern about the conservation. And there were not many other wolves left in Central Western Europe. There were still many, of course, in Eastern countries, like countries like Romania, Bulgaria, and Serbia, former Yugoslavia. They still had quite a few wolves and bears, of course. And Slovenia had just completed a reintroduction of lynx very successfully. So there was a kind of movement in re-establishing carnivores or protecting those that were still around.
Can you talk a bit more about this region of southern Italy, the Abruzzo region that keeps coming up, the terrain or the features that make it so suitable, I guess, for large carnivores?
Yeah, it is. It's a mountain area. There were traditionally the roads were small and few. Access to the area was not very easy. The highway between Rome and Abruzzo was completed years later on. And now, as I say, it takes an hour and a half But when I started, it took 4.5 hours to get to the Abruzzo. So the fact that it's been out of reach by the big numbers made the area very very wide, very wide. That was basically used only by shepherds and small village with an economy really of subsistence. There was not yet a touristic boom like in the following years. There was no skiing, nothing like that.
And when so I, all this is happening, what was the point in these decades where yourself, any of your colleagues saw that the populations of these carnivores, we're talking bears, wolves, even, I don't know, lynx and things like that, were considered at a point where they were either recovered or on their way to being considered protected in that way? Because I know sometimes there needs to be numbers that are hit. So what was that criteria for you?
No, there was no target. We just want to
Okay.
stop the illegal killing. And certainly we succeeded not in eliminating the illegal killing 100%, but reducing it dramatically. Now, you should remember that a wolf population, sorry, a wolf population that is in a favorable environment can grow rather rapidly. We do have good figures for other countries in Europe that have seen a recovery of wolves there. For example, in Germany, wolves have recovered at the rate of 35% a year. Now, 35 it's a lot. So it's enough that you stop the illegal killing for a while or reduce the amount of illegal killing, and the population immediately boosted up. And because of the wolves so easily disperse over long distances, you can quickly see wolves popping up even far away from where you thought there was a stable pack. So slowly, slowly, I shouldn't say slowly anymore, but quite rapidly, the old Apennines range of Italy became recolonized by the wolves. And then this process went on and on and on until in 92, we saw the first pair showing up in France, just crossing the border between Italy and France. So I had gone all the way along the Apennines toward the north and entered to France. And from there on, it just recolonized the Alps, France, Switzerland, Austria, and all that.
Wow. So they really were traversing. Was Italy the central point of the? It sounds like this was the central point of where they were dispersing to obviously to France and was that the idea? And then obviously coming from the east in Romania and Bulgaria and things like that.
Well, the Apennine Wolves has been the main responsible for the recolonization of France, Switzerland, and part of Austria. The dynamic population, that is the wolves from Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia, now from Croatia, Slovenia, and Serbia, they moved toward west also until a male disperser from Slovenia one day met a female disperser from the Western Alps, and they met in the central part of the Alps near Verona, if you know where it is, and they mate and produce the first litter in the central part of the Alps. And all the newspaper talks about Juliet and Romeo and Verona that met there and all that story, that kind of things. But anyway, wow. So this is for the Alps. If you look at the same kind of pattern in the northern part of Europe, the Polish population has been the main responsible for recolonize all of Germany, and then more recently into the Netherlands, Belgium, and they even found a wolf in Luxembourg, which is a tiny spot that probably can hold just one animal.
He's got the whole country to himself.
Exactly.
This is incredible. I mean, so we're looking at, because you mentioned 1982. So in this 20-year span, we go from wolves eating garbage to recolonizing a continent in that sense. Is that uh, this is maybe a little bit of a weird question here, but is it scary or is it exciting all in the same breath as a researcher to see nature sort of take its course in this way?
But from my point of view, it's exciting. It's a success. It's a beautiful story, and it's a success. Yes, and of course, we had to move quickly from the attitude of avoiding extinction to the attitude of managing a success, which requires a completely different set of values, a set of techniques. The animal rights groups or animalists have not changed that. And so they keep defending every single wolf. Every single wolf should be protected. But this is not the way to coexist. Coexistence, it means compromise. And compromise means also, getting rid of some animals if the animals is just incompatible. Compromise, it doesn't mean to eradicate all the wolves. That means that we should not be against getting rid of some of them when they're really too many. By doing that, I can see that there is room in Europe to have wolves everywhere, as long as we are ready to control certain situations where things get out of hands.
Yeah.
And what are the laws around how a rancher is legally permitted to respond to, say, a predation event or something?
First of all, as you know, Europe has 34 countries, and
Yeah.
each country has a different
Yeah,
legislation.
of course.
There
Right.
is an overall European level legislation, and that's called the Habitat Directive, that has the strength of a law and protect the wolf 100%. But you can still kill some under a derogation. You can get a derogation under certain very strict conditions. It can be done. But coexistence is made of many different tools. It's not only getting rid of the animals that make a disproportionate
Yep.
damage.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you have to prevent the damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, in preventing damage, the Italians have a lot to teach to the rest of the world. But not only the Italians, because the Greek are doing the same, the Turkish are doing the same, the Spanish have been doing the same for a long time. And that's the guarding dog. The guarding dog is extremely effective. Small flock, guarding dogs, presence of the shepherd all the time. That's the first way to protect your flock. Then, today, you have also other means, which are the electric fence. Electric fence, if properly managed and used, are fantastic. They keep away wolves. So, by using all this, you can prevent. You will never be able to prevent 100% of that. There will be certain situations where you can't. Okay, if the damage is too much, then you get rid of the wolf. But also, because I've just said that wolves are capable of going everywhere, you can expect a wolf downtown Rome tomorrow morning. I would not be surprised because they can go everywhere. And that's the logic of dispersing animals. A dispersing animal is, is meant to reshuffle the genetics of the population, of course, but also to explore new areas. By doing that, most of the dispersing animals naturally die because they end up in unsuitable areas. But they have to explore to find out suitable areas. Some will not succeed, some will succeed. And that's why you see new wolf group popping up in new areas. And this dispersal is huge. I mean, in North America, they know it very well. But in Europe, 2 years ago, a wolf radio collar in Switzerland has been killed in Slovakia after 3 months, 2,000 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers. Now you can see that Europe is small. 2,000 kilometers, you go basically everywhere. Yeah, and there was a wolf rescued from a channel downtown Milan a month ago. So, of course, you don't want wolves downtown Milan. So if you find a wolf there, that animal has to be removed. But there must be a plan to decide, to what extent do we want wolf nearby human settlements? Once we find that agreement, then we act.
Got it.
Yeah, I'm curious with such rapid wolf population growth. I mean, 35% a year is pretty impressive. There's an idea that some researchers here agree with and some don't, but that wolf populations, as they grow, especially at that rate, that they will self-manage because they kill each other so often, and as the prey base fluctuates because the population is booming, they will essentially self-limit. Have you found that to be a true statement?
It is true, but it is true that they will level up.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine that they will level up in an area that include Rome, Milano, and settlements and humans and sheep and goats and humans and everything.
Yep.
If you are ready to accept that this natural, topping up
Yep.
happen in close vicinity with humans, then it's okay. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
Mm. It seems like it's really about preparedness and having the action plan ready to go, as opposed to dealing with it on the fly. That really seems to be the major difference from what you're discussing, what happened in Italy and across most of Europe, as opposed to sometimes what happens here in North America.
Yeah, I mean, there are some stupid reaction in North America as well as in Europe. I mean, the case of Idaho with the law of killing 90% of the population, it just it's so ridiculous that you can't even get angry with that. But we have the same situation here. One of the richest country in the world is Switzerland, and they probably give a lot of money to India to save the tiger or to Kenya to save the elephants, and they cannot save their own few wolves. That's just equally ridiculous.
So, for going forward, what's the monitoring situation like? Is there, from the program that you started or the research that you started, are there many collars on wolves across Europe because of all different countries sort of diving in? And where is all of that information tabulated to be researched or to be looked at by the folks of the general public?
Now, there are, as I said before, I mean, there is a huge diversity of situations across Europe. Some countries have an excellent monitoring system. For example, I mean, Sweden has a complete pedigree of all the wolves of Sweden, 100%. All of them have a name and a genetic screen. On the opposite, you have a country like Romania that have so many wolves and so much wilderness that they can't have a monitoring system like that, even if they wanted. So if you ask them how many wolves you have, well, maybe 5,000, which is a very rough estimate. So there is a huge diversity. In Germany, they have a very good information system. And you go to the site, you find every day an updated map of where the wolves are, how many packs, and so on and so on. But from a management point of view, they are not so good. Why? Because Germany is a federal country and the responsibility for managing is up to the lender, each individual lender, not at the federal level. And managing a wolf population at the scale of a small region is actually almost impossible because wolves move around. The spatial and temporal scale of a wolf population is so much bigger than our regional administration. And so, as I said, it depends on the countries. Spain has the wolf population divided in two. The northern part used to be huntable, and the lower part, south of the river Duero, was totally protected. Then a few years ago, they decided that all the wolves of Spain had to be fully protected, and they did it. And then 3 days ago, I give you this information that you don't know. 3 days ago, the Spanish parliament again decided that the wolves can be hunted north of the river Duero. Said so they will do it. So, it's very difficult to keep track of all this. Not much radio collaring is done. In Sweden, yes, they do have several radio collars in many packs. In Italy, very few, because you really don't need to find out more about the biology of wolves. You have enough information from the damage they do, the compensation paid, yeah, this sort of things. You really don't need that. What would be really urgent in Europe is a more coordination in the monitoring system, so that you can compare number and trends across the continent.
Yeah, that makes sense. Uh, we want to get into this large carnivore initiative for Europe, which you're a chair of. Describe what that is for anybody who's listening, because we looked at the site and sort of some of the projects that are being done. Just go into that and what that means and what that is for Europe.
Well, at the end of the 80s, early 90s, WWF International decided that the fate of that the situation of large herbivores and large carnivores in Europe was without sufficient support from the conservation movement. So they established a large herbivore initiative and a large carnivore initiative. They called around these two the few experts that were available at that time from different countries, and they supported a number of studies to find out more of the situation of herbivores and carnivores, what had to be done, and so on, starting sort of lobbying at the European Union level and so on. Then WWF, after a few years, said, okay, we established that, now you fly with your own wings, and we disappear. And so the large herbivore collapsed and disappeared. And the large carnivore initiative, we got together and we decided to try to become a formal group of experts under the IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the Species Survival Commission. I was already member of that at that time, and I lobbied for that, and we were accepted as a formal group of IUCN. And since that time, which was 96, we have been a member of IUCN, very successful. We have not tried to bring together all experts on large carnivores in Europe. That would have been a group of 1,000 people, and it would have been the group unmanageable. So we kept the group very small. We are now 54, which is probably the maximum we ever reached. And we have at least one person for every European country, and two for where we do have a very different situation for wolves and bears or lynx and so on. And we gain a lot of prestige, I should say, at the level of the European Commission. And so our main work is actually to provide the data, technical support, information, networking, communication at the European level. We rarely deal with issues at national level, but we remain at continental level. So we proposed the concept of population level management plans, and that has been accepted by the European Commission. And recently, with the proposal of downlisting the wolf from fully protected to just protected, we have been asked to support the Commission with new maps of distribution, new estimate of numbers, a new conceptual paper on how to estimate and how to assess favorable conservation status, which is the target of the Habitat Directive, and so on. So we work very successfully at European level, I should say.
Wow. There was one, I don't know if it was a paper or something that we looked in on the website, and it was talking about the strong habituation and bold behavior of wolves. I don't know if it was specific to Italy or specific just to Europe in general. What's the basis of that research, and what are sort of the strong habituated practices that you're seeing with wolves in particular that's allowing this to move forward and to make this something to have a paper on or to have research on?
Well, bold or confident animals pop up easily everywhere across the continent. So we have seen some of this behavior in Italy, in Germany, in Sweden, Finland, Spain, Hungary, and so on. So it's a widespread, but fortunately, it's very rare. It happen when an animal is habituated, for example, by people feeding them. Then the animal, the animal learn to come close to humans. Why not? Or there was a case here near Rome last year. Was a small village, and the little ladies of this village used to feed the cats there, and you just leaving the croquettes for the cats in the street. And as I say, the wolves come close to humans all the time. They came, sniffed the croquette, and came into the village. So they learn, and they were easily seen by the people until the cat, until the wolf, after finished the croquette, saw the cat. It was a very good meal too. And so caught the cat and killed the cat. And that disaster. And they want to kill the wolf at that point. That was an animal that became confident because of the behavior of people so we wanted to issue a sort of handbook on how to manage the case of confident animals, which is actually very easy. And there is a different level of confidence until the last one, which is too much, and there is nothing else that removing the animals from the nature.
Right.
Was there anything other than habituation that you all believed was making these animals bold and habituated? Because we spoke with some researchers here in the States, and there's a paper by Kira Cassidy talking about toxoplasmosis and eating of cat feces. Is that anything in there, or is it strictly looking at people feeding animals or leaving food out, similar to what it was back in the early 70s with those trash heaps?
No, we don't have any evidence of that. We haven't done the research on toxoplasmosis, which is a beautiful research, by the way, very, very nice stuff. But there is another issue in Europe that we want to flag and is important, and that is hybridization with dogs. Now, it's not widespread. It is within a very small percentage in most of the continent, but in certain areas, actually, the percentage is quite high. And there is a region here in Italy, in central Italy, in Tuscany, where we found that up to 70% of the animals have some hybridization level. Now, hybridization
Wow.
is difficult to define, because if you have two species merging 50-50, the hybrid is 50-50. It's easy to see. But then if the offspring mate again with one of the two, say dogs or wolves, then you have the hybridization percentage going slower and slower and slowly. And so when is the threshold when you say this is an hybrid or not? Very difficult to say. It's a political decision, has not been made. And we now rely on the fact that you can detect hybrids up to the second generation, not farther than that. So then we may, you can, what do you do with hybrids? If it's an isolated hybridization case, you just get rid of all pack and remove it from the wild. Very easy. This has been done last year, for example, by the Slovenian at the border with Italy. There was a dog and a wolf and a she-wolf. And they had a litter, removed all of them. But if you have a widespread hybridization across the whole population, you can't kill, all the animals there. You just have to coexist with that problem. So that is an issue. There are fake news around saying that the hybrids are more aggressive. That's not true. But certainly behavior has also a genetic basis, and you can't forget that. So you may have some behavioral traits that are affected by hybridization. So we should be careful. There is a very nice scientific project going on right now, run by Italy, but with the participation of many countries in Europe about this, the issue of hybridization, how to define, how to detect, and how to manage that.
Is there a concerted effort now to trap animals that are suspected of being hybrids, or to test them and to confirm, or you just monitor it over long periods of time and keep tabs on how genetics might be changing if they are?
No, there isn't a coordinated effort to trap these animals. And here again, I point my finger to the ultra animalist group, that they want to protect everything, and so they are an obstacle on trapping hybrids and getting rid of them.
Is this something that's happening naturally, like naturally occurring, or is this something that humans are promoting? Because that's something that happens here. I mean, we have a sanctuary full of, hybrids of animals that have been bred specifically together, dog and wolf, something that's similar. Is that what's happening over there, or is it a naturally occurring process where dogs and wolves
naturally occurring dogs? Because
naturally occurring, okay.
Especially in the Mediterranean, but not only in the Mediterranean, there are many free-ranging dogs. But I say not only here. In fact, we do have a case of hybridization in Finland, in Estonia, in countries where you don't have a feral dog, so you don't have stray dogs around. And still, when there is an animal in heat, it's very easy that your dog run away. And most of the case of hybridization are between a she-wolf and a male dog.
Yeah, I've heard of instances here in the West of people just illegally releasing hybrid animals into the woods.
I can imagine.
You guys don't have that issue. That's not an issue there.
No. We don't have that. We don't have that, but we do have many people having the so-called the Dutch wolf dog.
Yep.
Which is a dog breed.
Oh,
looks like a wolf, and it's vicious. Actually, I don't like those animals at all, and they can be even dangerous. And I really don't understand that. So, if you want to have a dog, why don't you have a dog?
A nice dog that wants to be pet.
Have a dog, yeah, exactly. Just have one that's a regular breed in that instance. Exactly. You would think. Oh my goodness. So when you give an overall look of because we've really covered the gamut, does it look like populations of these predators, wolf, bear, lynx, well, it seems as though they're on their way, or at least they're repopulating on their own naturally. Do you feel like in the future these populations are just going to continue to do what they do as long as we have these these guardrails in place for us as humans, meaning keep away with the habituation. If there are problem animals, regulations, things like that, do you feel that the trajectory will stay the same? And as we covered earlier, that they'll level off and things will essentially be back to normal in that way, wildly in the ecology sense.
Now, looking into the future is always dangerous because
always. I know.
In the 70s, I would have never guessed that the wolf would recolonize so quickly all of none of us wolf biologists would have predicted that. And so it's difficult. But my guess is that we are, if not already there, about to reach the maximum number of wolves in Europe. There will be some further increase, especially in Spain, in Germany, toward the central southern part of Germany and all that. But the range will increase, but the numbers of wolves will probably not increase, because I can predict that in the next few years, many more wolves will be killed legally to keep the population low in certain areas.
Got it.
Yeah.
Luigi, this has been an absolutely incredible conversation to have with you.
Mm-hmm.
My last question is, when you hear the word wolf, what is the thing that comes to your mind?
A fantastic animal. I just love them. And you know why? Because the more I study, the more I learn. I never finish to learn. They are so adaptable that, in every new situation, it's a new animal. It's incredible. It's not like my dog who is here. He's always the same, idiot. But the wolf is not.
Oh man. I mean, here's to that 3-month journey continuing on for more years. I know you probably didn't anticipate 50 years, but it's yielded incredible results and fantastic research. We can't thank you enough for spending your time this evening with us and sharing all this wonderful knowledge you have. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely. Just hang on a minute while we sign off. How's to y'all out there? We'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.